Atonement, Yom Kippur 2014, a marriage fit for a king. Oh, always work better when you turn it on. All right, in Israel's early history, marriages were prearranged, especially those connected with royalty and aristocracy. And so it is with our marriage to Yahushua. You know, this is also a prearranged marriage. Sometimes the father of the bridegroom would seek out a bride for his son, and sometimes the bridegroom himself would go and find his own bride. We see examples of this in Scripture. We see in Genesis 24, 2-4, it says, "And Abraham said unto his eldest servant of his house that ruled over all that he had, Put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and I will make thee swear by Yahuwah, the Elohim of the heaven and the Elohim of the earth, that thou shalt not take a wife unto my son of the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I dwell. But thou shalt go unto my country and my kindred, and take a wife unto my son Esau," for Isaac. You know, now, it says that he was not to take a bride from where he dwelt. And even as the Messiah is dwelling at the right hand of the Father, he's not going to take a bride from where he's dwelling either. He's going to take a bride from here, from the earth. Also, we see in Genesis 29:10-12, it says, "And it came to pass when Yaakov saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Yaakov went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban and his mother's brother. And Yaakov kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. And Yaakov told Rachel that he was her father's brother and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father." Now, what he didn't tell her is that, "I'm here to marry you. You know, I came here to find a bride, and I think you're it." But later on, she would find this true vow. So we see an example of the father seeking out the bride, and we see an example of the bridegroom seeking out his own bride. Now, after the father or bridegroom will find a prospective bride, they then go and throw a feast at her parents' house to negotiate her purchase price, which was called the mohar, which is number 4119 in the Strong's, and it means purchase price for a wife. See, we have to understand, you know, back then, you know, wives wasn't free, gentlemen. And in many ways, they aren't free today either. But they weren't free. You know, there was a purchase price to be paid. And we have an example of Yaakov in Genesis 29:18-20. It says, "And Yaakov loved Rachel and said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, thy younger daughter. And Laban said, it's better that I give her to thee than that I should give her to another man. Abide with me. And Yaakov served 7 years for Rachel, and days seemed unto him but a few days for the love that he had to her." That was some pretty expensive love, was it not? Yes. You know, 7 years. 7 years. Not 7 weeks or 7 months. But 7 years, you know. You know, that Rachel cost him an arm and a leg, did she not? Yes. You know, but if you thought that was expensive, I have you know that our mohar cost Yahushua a pretty penny as well. In fact, it cost him more than an arm and a leg. It cost him his whole body. You know, we read in Ephesians 5:25-27, "Husbands, love your wives, even as Messiah also loved the ecclesia and gave himself for it." Yeah, that's right. He gave his entire life for his bride, that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself a glorious ecclesia, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy without blemish. You know, it says that he gave himself for his bride. And the reason being that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of the water by the word. You know, if we're to be the bride of Messiah, then we need to be cleansed. You know, he's not coming for a bride that has spot or wrinkle. We need to be cleansed, and the way that we're cleansed is by the washing of the word. What word? That word that came from, that flowed from his belly, that living water. You know, and this is important to understand, you know, because that speaks of his teachings and instructions. That's what washes us, you know, in accordance to that word. That's what causes us to be presented as a glorious ecclesia, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing. But that is we should be holy and without blemish. You know, in order to do that, we need his teachings and instructions. Now, that being said, we're going to take a little side note here, because in that today's Day of Atonement, it speaks to, you know, when you look up the word Kippur, it speaks to the browbeat, you know, and to, you know, to really get on yourself and make certain that, you know, you're on top of your square, and that, you know, everything is in place in your life, you know. So that being said, you know, it's going to be some admonishments, you know, coming through this lesson, you know, if you have ears to hear, which I pray you do, you know. But concerning this side note, many so-called Christians today are, you know, in some cases aren't even covenanted to Yahushua. Sure, they think they are, but are they really? When we look over in Matthew 26 verses 17 through 20, let me have my first reader read Matthew 26, 17 through 20, and then drop down to 1 Corinthians verses 11, chapter 11, verses 24 through 28. Please.
Now the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciple came to Yahushua, saying unto him, Where wilt thou that we prepare for thee to eat the Passover? And he said, Go into the city to such a man, and say unto him, The master saith, My time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at the house with my disciples. And the disciples did as Yahushua had appointed them, and they made ready the Passover. Now, when the even was come, he sat down with the 12. And having given thanks, he broke it and said, Take, eat, this is my body, which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. In the same way, also the cup, and after supper, saying, This cup is the renewed covenant in my blood. As often as ye drink it, do this in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the death of the master until he comes. So that whoever should eat this bread or drink this cup of the master unworthily shall be guilty of the body and blood of the master. But let a man examine himself, and so let him eat of that bread and drink of that cup.
Okay, now, both of these things happened during the same night, just given from different testimonies. You know, in fact, everything we're going to speak to, this side note, is pretty much happened during this night. You know, verses 29 and 30 of 1 Corinthians 11 goes on to say, For the one who is eating and drinking unworthily eats and drinks judgment to himself, not discerning the body of the master. In verse 30, because of this, many are weak and sick among you, and many sleep. You know, meaning dead. You know, so this is a real important matter here. You know, And I know it's common amongst many Christians to actually do this like 12 times a year. You know, every first Sunday of the month or something to that effect. You know, but are they really partaking of the covenant of Messiah? You know, as I was going through this, y'all began to put this on my heart, you know, and this side note came out, you know, but the reason that I have Matthew 26:17 through 20 here is to give you a timeline, you know, of what's going on, you know, and I just like the wording of the way Paul said what transpired, his testimony of what transpired here in 1 Corinthians 11. But it's speaking of the same night during pretty much the same time, okay? Now we see in Matthew 26:17 it says, "Where wilt thou that we prepare to eat the Passover?" You know, and I know the day is atonement, you know, Yom Kippur, you know, but like I said, this is a side note. It's still a feast day, right? You know, so where wilt thou go to prepare to eat the Passover? It says, "I will keep the Passover at thy house with my disciples." And they made ready the Passover. Okay, so it lets us know 3 times that they're dealing with the Passover. Amen? Amen. Now, it says, "And having given thanks, he broke it and said, Take, eat, this is my body, which is broken for you." You know, and in verse 25 it says, "This cup is the renewed covenant in my blood. And for as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup," you know, so whatever, for whoever should eat this bread or this cup of the master. See all this is speaking about something in particular, and that's the point that I'm trying to make here. It's speaking about something in particular, a particular cup, a particular bread, a particular meal, you know, and it's in conjunction with this Passover meal, you know, and, you know, in saying that, you know, it's not in conjunction with any meal. It's not in conjunction with any time that you guys, you know, that one wants to choose. You know, but it's something, you know, in particular. You know, he's speaking to a specific time that occurred at a specific place, you know, and it was centered around a specific Moedim or appointed time of Yah. You know, and it was in conjunction with his Passover. So, you know, I'm not too sure that you can do this anytime you want. You know, and that's the point that I'm trying to make. You know, and some people, you know, that's the only time they've done it. You know, is, you know, somewhere, some first Sunday or something. You know, and I know many people take, where's the verse that says, you know, so as often as you do this. 26, okay. Yeah, "For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the death of the master till he comes." And some people think that, you know, that means, you know, whenever you want. You know, no. It's centered around Yah's plan for humanity, which is entailed within his Moedim, within his appointed times. You know, they're called his appointed times because that's when he's going to be there. That's when he's going to show up. You know, now, if he's not there, then that tells you right there, something's going to be a whole lot different concerning what you're doing. You know, because he's speaking of when he will be there, during his appointed time. Now, we know that it's in conjunction with the Passover, right? Now, in Exodus 12, 48 and 49, we read, "When a stranger shall sojourn with thee, and will keep the Passover to Yahuwah, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near and keep it. And he shall be as one that is born in the land." Now, catch this. "For no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof. one law or one Torah shall be to him that is homeborn and unto the stranger that sojourneth among you. Now, what this teaches us is that any and everyone was not allowed to partake of the Passover. You know, you couldn't just walk up off the street and say, okay, I want to partake of the Passover. It didn't work like that. Hence we have here, for no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof. The criteria for partaking of Yah's Passover. Yep, that Passover where they slew the lamb and took the blood and put it on the doorpost and caused death to pass over. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Any and everyone couldn't just come and take that. They had to be circumcised. And it wasn't to be one way for one group of people in him and another way for another group of people in him. Hence, verse 49 says, one law shall be to him that is homeborn and unto the stranger that sojourneth you. And we know that Yahuwah changeth not. Amen. We know he's the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. Amen. Amen. So we know that didn't change. You know, so what's going on here? We have, that was the natural, first the natural, then the spiritual. And then we have the spiritual, which is found in Romans 2:25. It says, for circumcision verily profiteth if thou keep the law. But if thou be a breaker of the law, then thy circumcision is made uncircumcision. Therefore, if the uncircumcision keep the righteousness of the law, shall not his circumcision be counted for circumcision? And shall not uncircumcision, which is by nature, if it fulfill the law, judge thee by who the letter and circumcision does transgress the law? For he is not a Yahudim or a Jew, which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision, which is outward in the flesh. But he is a Yahudim, which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, and not in the letter, whose praise is not of men, but of Elohim. See, circumcision was and is simply a graphic picture of the conscious decision to remove the excess covering in which every man and woman is born with. And that's a covering by, our adversary in all actuality. And it typifies a new beginning. Hence, it was to be done on the 8th day. It typifies a new beginning. That is, a new beginning, one with a new head. No pun intended. In Messiah, the outward circumcision isn't necessary for us today. Or it was the sign of the fleshly covenant with a fleshly father of many nations. But today we now have a spiritual father of many nations, complete with a renewed covenant. That said, the inward circumcision. That said, the inward circumcision is of the heart. Is of the heart in the spirit. Is of the heart and the spirit, and is quite necessary today. This is what's necessary, is that we have our hearts circumcised, that the excess in our hearts be done away with. The current spirit, this is accomplished not by cutting out the heart. We're not going to physically cut out our heart to remove its current spirit, but it's done via baptism. That is, being immersed into the name of Yahushua. And it's not just, in the name of Yahushua. No, it's being immersed into his character. Being put into the name of something means being put into the nature or character of it, into its reputation, into its authority. This is what we're immersed into. We're to be immersed into, along with one's heart being immersed into the cleansing power of the living waters that flow from our Messiah's belly. You know, this is what we're to be immersed into, his teachings and instructions, Yahshua's commandments, which work to wash and cut away any and all that is unclean from our hearts, even excess unclean spirits. You know, see, this is what the baptism is centered around, circumcising the heart. You know, for when you're immersed into the word of Elohim, when you're immersed into his teachings and instructions, it will begin to cause to wash away, even cut away, because the word is also a sword, amen. It will begin to cause to wash away, even cut away, everything that is in excess that's within your heart. Everything that is in excess to Yah. So any unclean thing, any unclean spirits, any unclean thoughts will all be washed away. See, this is how that bride is made without spot or wrinkle. You know, and, you know, it's real important to understand that. You know, because before one could partake of the Passover, which is absolutely necessary, because the Messiah, you know, Yochanan the Immerser, he bore witness to the Messiah. First thing he said, behold, the Lamb of Elohim, which cometh to take away the sins of the world. See, but before you can partake of the Passover, you must first be circumcised. Now, again, we're not talking physically here, you know, but you must be circumcised. That is, you must have your heart circumcised. And this is done via baptism. A true baptism, which involves more than just getting wet. You know, it involves being immersed into the teachings and instructions of Yah, being immersed into his name, taking on his character, taking on his reputation, taking on his authority. To do so, one becomes inwardly circumcised, and they're allowed to partake of Pesach, the Passover. See, then they can partake of the lamb that was slain to cover the sins of the world. You know, see, but when you're baptized, you know, you go in one way, but you don't come out the same. Not when it's done right. You know, you go in one way, you know, like I went in Ronnie, but I didn't come out Ronnie. I went in Ronnie, I came out Obadiah. You know, now, when I was immersed into his word, you know, and it doesn't mean to just dip, it means to immerse and keep it there until it's changed. You know, now, you know, you'll never become Yahshua, that is the word of Elohim, even though you may be immersed in it all your life. You'll never become him. You know, but you will not be the same one that went in. You'll be a mixture of the two. You'll be a new creation in Messiah. You know, and when your heart is truly circumcised, you'll find that you have a new heart, that it's been changed too. Even where the word teaches, let this mind be in you that was in Messiah Yahshua. Amen? Amen. You know, so, you know, that's just as a side note. But now we're going to get back to Yom Kippur and the Day of Atonement. A marriage fit for a king. Okay, we need to remember the fact that we've been purchased. For many of us seem to think we're allowed to do whatever we like. But how can we do whatever we like when our Boaz, that is our Yahushua, paid for us with his life? If he paid for us and we now belong to him, ought we to be doing his bidding? Yes. Else, how is his living waters that flow from his belly to cleanse us? They can't cleanse us if we're not putting them on us. You understand? You know, the waters are only, they're good to remove every spot and wrinkle. But that's only if you use them. You know, if you don't use them, then they're not going to accomplish much. See, and unfortunately, they're not really getting used that much. In 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, we read, but there were false prophets also among the people, even as there shall be false teachers among you. See, this speaks to the reason why those living waters aren't being used. And even though they were spilled out from our Messiah a couple thousand years ago, they're still living, even as he's still living. You know, and the reason why they're not being used as much is because of what this passage here in 2 Peter that speak of false prophets that were among them, even as there will be false teachers among you, he teaches, who privily shall bring in damnable heresies, even denying the Adonai that brought them, and bring upon themselves swift destruction. You know, yeah, they may bring upon themselves swift destruction, but the damage is already done. You know, yeah, they may go into swift destruction, but they've already inflicted the damage. Those damnable heresies that people begin to hold on to and to walk in, and you know, and to think that they're doing rightly. It goes on to say, and many shall follow their pernicious ways, by reason of whom the way shall be spoken, that shall be evil spoken of. And through covetousness shall they with vain words make merchandise of you, whose judgment now of a long time lingereth not, and their damnation slumbereth not. See, their damnation, even though they don't went to swift destruction, the damnation that they put in place, it doesn't slumber. It doesn't die. It's still living on. You know, and many are following their pernicious ways. You know, and they're still making merchandise of you. They're still making merchandise of you. You know, that's not hard to see. You know, when you look at, you know, mainstream Christianity. We must always keep at the forefront of our hearts and minds 1 Corinthians 6:20, for ye are bought with a price. Therefore glorify Elohim in your body and in your spirit, which are Elohim's. Again, in 1 Corinthians 7:23, we're told, ye are bought with a price. Be not ye the servants of men. Stop serving men and begin to serve Elohim. In your body and spirit, glorify him. You know, try to think of things that you can do to bring glory to his name throughout your day. You know, when you getting ready to rock the latest designer, you know, think about how you can rock something that glorifies him upon your body. You know, how about your greeting, your salutation? Hey, how can it glorify him? You know, there's ways you can glorify him in everything that you do. But are we seeking to do that? You know, sometimes it's because we don't want to be walking around looking like a religious nut, huh? You know? But that's what the apostles were called. That's what Messiah was called. The betrothal took place by way of a ceremony, usually at the bride's parents' house, but at the expense of the bridegroom. You know, usually the bridegroom side of the family paid for it. It was also during this time that the mohar, or purchase price, was agreed upon. We can see how far away we done got away from things, huh? Now, Judges 14:10 says, so his father went down unto the woman, and Samson made there a feast, for so used the young men to do. See, we have a scriptural example. You know, here Samson, father, went down to the bride that he wanted and made there a feast, because that's what the men used to do, you know. Now, it's also during this time that the bridegroom and the bride agreed upon a ketubah. That is a marriage covenant that both vowed to keep. And, you know, this is probably where, you know, the vows of marriage came from. You know, they did borrow much of what they do today from this ancient way. Yochanan 13, 1 and 2. That is now before the feast of the Passover, when Yahushua knew that his hour had come, that he should depart out of this world unto the Father, having loved his own which were in the world. He loved them unto the end. And supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Yahudas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him. I don't quite know where I'm going with this. I don't know if that was oh, okay. I'm back on track. What I'm seeking to do is show you the feast that Yah had, for his ecclesia. Even as we see what the custom was, now we're going to take a look at where the ecclesia received their feast. And here it is. It was this is the timeline here. Yochanan 13:1 is dealing with the Last Supper that we were speaking of just prior. Now we see it's the feast of Passover, when Yahushua knew that his hour was come and that he should depart out of this world unto the Father. That gives us our timeline, and these were things that were said. After that dinner. In Yochanan 15, 1 through 8, the Messiah would tell his apostles that night. I have my next reader read Yochanan 15, 1 through 8.
I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman. Every branch in me that beareth not fruit, he taketh away. And every branch that beareth fruit, he purgeth, that it may bring forth more fruit. Now ye are clean through the word which I have spoken unto you. Abide in me, and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abide in the vine. No more can ye, except ye abide in me. I am the vine, ye are the branches. He that abide in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit. For without me ye can do nothing. If a man abide not in me, he is cast forth as a branch, and is withered. And a man gathered them, and cast them in the fire, and they are burned. If ye abide in me, and my words abide in you, ye shall ask what ye will, and it shall be done unto you. Herein my Father glorified, that ye bear much fruit, so shall ye be my disciples.
Okay. This is that Last Supper, and this was when his bride would have that feast, in which he would tell them that, he was about to go and lay down his life for them, pay the mohar. Now, 15:3, Yochanan 15:3 again bears witness to how we're made clean in Yahshua. Ye are clean through the word which I have spoken unto you. So again, we see here it's his teachings and instructions that causes us to be clean. His commandments, with emphasis on that. In verse 5, he says, I am the vine, ye are the branches. He that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit. For without me, ye can do nothing. See, you have to understand that. Without him, we can do nothing. We have to stay attached to the vine. We're just the branches. And a man abide not in me, and he is cast forth as a branch, and is withered, and men gather him and cast them into the fire, and they are burned. We don't want this fate. We want to stay attached to the vine. How do we do that? Verse 7, if ye abide in me, and my words abide in you, ye shall ask what ye will, and it shall be done unto you. We can have whatever we ask, as long as we're attached to the vine. As long as we're attached to the vine and we're bearing fruit, then we can have whatever we ask. See, because, Yah doesn't have, any problem giving us what we ask, because we're not going to ask for nothing foolish. He knows that because, the heart that was in Messiah will be in us, because we have that circumcised heart. Amen. Right. So we'll only be asking for those things that are righteous, just, and true. We'll only be asking for those things to help further the kingdom, knowing that, you know, one day we will rule and reign with our Messiah. You know, so this is what I want you to see. You know, these things were actually done to the ecclesia, and there is going to be a marriage fit for a king. Now, in addition to the mohar, which usually went to the father of the bride, a matan, number 4976 in the Strong's in Hebrew, which means a gift or gifts, were also oftentimes given to the bride. It was usually items of value, you know. So, in addition to the mohar, you know, there was also gifts usually given. And we see an example of this in Scripture from Genesis 34, 8 through 12. Can I have my next reader read Genesis 34, 8 through 12?
And Hamor communed with them, saying, the soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. I pray you give him to wife. And make ye marriages with us, and give your daughters to us, and take our daughters to you. And ye shall dwell with us, and the land shall be before you. Dwell and trade ye here therein, and get you possessions therein. And Shechem said unto her father, and unto her brethren, let me find grace in your eyes, and what ye shall say unto me I will give. Ask me never so much dowry and gift, and I will give according as ye shall say unto me. But give me the damsel to wife.
Yes, so we see here, you know, Shechem is asking, you know, whatever dowry and matan that you want, name it. You know, never mind he was in the wrong, but, you know, the point that I'm trying to point out is, you know, he was the dowry and the matan, you know, it was customary, you know, and he was willing to give whatever was asked of him. Now, it's important to note that ancient marriages wasn't just an agreement betwixt two individuals, as we see today. You know, oftentimes today, you know, folks go and elope, and you know, it's just an agreement betwixt two individuals. You know, but rather in ancient times, it was an agreement betwixt two families, as we see being implied up above. You know, you will make marriages with us and give us your daughters and unto us, and take our daughters unto you. You know, so we'll be entwined. We'll become, you know, one family. You know, the mohar wasn't always money either. It could have been whatever, such as the 100 scalps of the Philistines that was demanded of King David, or 7 years of labor, as with Yaakov. You know, so the mohar, you know, let's, you know, one think that, you know, they'll never be able to get married because they're poor. You know, there was other ways around this. You know, there was other ways of accomplishing this. Now, Yahushua paid a very high price for our mohar dowry when he laid down his life for us. But what of our matan? What of our gifts? You know, do we have any gifts? Did he leave us any gifts? Did he give us a matan? And surely he did. And they're enlisted in 1 Corinthians 12, 7 through 14. My next reader, please.
But the manifestation of the Ruach is given to every man to profit withal. For to one is given by the Ruach the word of wisdom, to another the word of knowledge by the same Ruach, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another the gifts of healing by the same Spirit, to another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another discerning of Ruach, to another divers kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. But all these worketh that one and the self-same Ruach, dividing to every man severally as he will. For as the body is one, and hath many members, and all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Messiah. For by one Ruach are we all baptized into one body, whether we be Jews or Gentiles, whether we be bond or free, and have been all made to drink into one ruach. For the body is not one member, but many.
Absolutely. So here we see that we have been given gifts. We have our matan. We've been given spiritual gifts, you know, of the best kind. Amen. Now, ancient marriages had 2 ceremonies, you know, with an interval in between. The first ceremony was what we've been speaking of, the betrothal. But then, you know, there was another ceremony that would come afterwards. We have an example of this. Judges 14:10 says, "So his father went down unto the woman, and Samson made there a feast, for so used the young men do. And it came to pass, when they saw him, they brought 30 companions to be with him. And Samson said unto them, I will now put forth a riddle unto you, if you can certainly declare it to me within the 7 days of the feast, and find it out, then I will give you 30 sheets and 30 changes of garments." You know, and here we have a scriptural example of how long this feast will last. It wasn't just a dinner. It was a 7-day feast, you know, and, you know, that's quite a long time. You know, this thing is looking real expensive on the man's end, isn't it? You know, you know, I had to work 7 years and bring back 100 scalps, and, you know, you know, yeah, had to die, but yeah, but, you know, to y'all be the glory, you know. We want to make y'all's effort well worth it, you know, by doing all that we can to be without spot and without wrinkle. And you best believe, after going through all that he went through, he's only going to pick the very best. You know, after this betrothal or engagement whereby the mohar or dowry was paid, the union was binding. You know, and that's something that we don't see today. So I want to emphasize that, you know, after the betrothal or engagement, the union was binding then. And in Yah's eyes, the couple was considered already married, even though they hadn't consummated it. You know, and we see an example of this in Deuteronomy 22, 23, and chapter 22, verses 23 and 24. It says, "If a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed unto an husband, and a man find her in the city and lie with her, then ye shall bring them both out unto the gate of that city, and ye shall stone them with stones, that they die. The damsel because she cried not, being in the city, and the man because he hath humbled his neighbor's wife." Not fiance, wife. "So thou shalt put away evil from among you." So, we see here that, you know, the engagement was binding, you know, and the engagement, you know, I neglected to show in scripture, but, you know, the woman did have a say-so. It wasn't like, you know, this thing was prearranged and, you know, and she did not get a chance to get a say-so at all. We see an example in the story of Eleazar going to get Rebecca for Isaac. You know, they asked, "Would you go with this man?" You know, and this was even after he gave the gifts. So, you know, she still had a say-so. And so do we. We have a say-so. You know, yes, Yah paid this, you know, this very high price for our mohar, but we still have a say-so. We still can say no. You know, and so it was the right of the prospective bride. So, you know, just keep that in mind as well. You know, because some of us are still saying no. You know, the covenant complete with vows was called a ketubah, or a tenayim, which means conditions for the marriage. It contained a penalty that applied to either party in case of a breach. You know, so if you don't do what you're supposed to do, then this is what's going to happen. You know, and if I don't do what I'm supposed to do, then this is what's going to happen. You know, Israel of old, you know, is likened unto Leah, you know, weary. And she received her ketubah, or Tanaim, at Mount Sinai, which amounts to the whole of the Tanakh. i.e. the Brit Zakaneh. Old covenant writings, that is. You know, but those of us who are of younger Israel, that is, born again Israel, we are Rachel. You know, the young lamb. And we received our ketubah or Tenaim during Yahushua's Sermon on the Mount. And it amounts to the whole of the Tanakh in addition to the Brit Kadashah. You know, in other words, it speaks to the teachings and instructions, the commandments of Yahshua, as well as the commandments that was given to Moses. You know, and we have a testament to that given right here in Matthew, chapter 5, verses 17 through 19. One of the first things that he said on that Sermon to the Mount, one of the first things that he taught was, think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, not one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled. Whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do them and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. You know, so he's saying, whoever decide not to do the least commandments, that is Torah, and teach others to do likewise, will be called least in the kingdom. But those who do them and teach others to do them will be called great in the kingdom. So which one do you want to be? You want to be the least in the kingdom, or you want to be the greatest in the kingdom? Choice is yours, you know. Or, like I said, you know, you could opt out. You don't even have to, you know, accept the bridegroom's offer. After the betrothal, that is the Aras, number 781, meaning to engage for matrimony, there was an integral or purification period. Now, this purification period usually lasted for about a year, or usually lasted over a year in all actuality. You know, now, you know, this is likened unto today's engagement period. You know, but as we see, it lasted over a year. And in some cases, you know, they just wanted to make certain what they were getting what they paid for. If they paid for a virgin, they wanted to make sure that they was getting one. You know, and after a year, if she would magically start showing or something, you know, showed herself to be pregnant, then they knew something wasn't right, you know, with that virgin, you know, such as what happened to Joseph when the Messiah was to be born. You know, and it took Yah himself to intervene, you know, as it probably would have with me as well. You know, but there was a period, and it usually lasted over a year. We see an example of this in Esther, chapter 2, verses 8 through 11. My next reader, please.
So it came to pass when the king's commandments and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace, to the custody of Haggai, that Hester was brought unto the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her things for purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens which were meet to be given her out of the king's house. And he preferred her and her maidens unto the best place of the house of the women. Esther had not showed her people nor her kindred for Mordecai, and changed her that he should not show it. And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house to know that Esther did and what should become of her.
Okay. Now, I want to point out is that he speedily gave her things for purification with such things as belonged to her, 7 maidens which were meet to be given to her. And out of the king's house and preferred her her maids unto the best place of the house of the women. You know, this was the speaks to that time of purification that would happen in the interim. And it's important to note that, you know, it oftentimes lasted for over a year, and this is the time that the bride would actually be purifying herself. You know, even like right now, like we spoke about being washed with the water of the word, you know, we're to be purifying ourselves. If we want to be that bride, if we want to be nominated as that bride, we're to be purifying ourselves with the water of the word, you know, with the teachings and instructions, the commandments of Yahushua, the commandments of Elohim. We're to be washing and cleansing ourselves, making ourselves without spot or wrinkle. Now, during this purification period, the woman was trained and prepared that she might become a befitting bride. You're not just born knowing how to be a bride. You know, and contrary to popular belief, you know, I guess, you know, many people think that, you know, folks are just born knowing how to be a bride. The young lady may not even have thought about being a bride until, you know, a courter came along and, you know, and chose her. You know, so now here it is, you know, during this year's process while she's purifying herself, you know, she's also learning to be a bride. You know, the mother and grandmother, the aunts, you know, they would take her and they would teach her about being a bride. You know, and this is something that's really lacking nowadays. No one's teaching these women how to be a bride. No one's teaching the men how to be husbands. You know, and it was true on the opposite end too. You know, the bridegroom, you know, he would go away. We'll get to that in a minute, but you know, he'd be taught how to be a husband. You know, these things are very much lacking in the kingdom of Elohim today. We have to get back to these things in the kingdom. You know, kingdom don't look like the world. It shouldn't look like the world. You know, for Yah's ways is as far away from man's way as light is from the night, right? Right. You know, so it says, okay, I already said that. If the bride was found to be impure by the end of this interim, then the covenant could be voided. You know, all bets are off. Give me my dowry back. Give me my mohar. I want my 7 years labor back. You know, you're going to have to reimburse me for that, bruh. You know, I'm not paying for that. You know, so the purification period could last much longer than a year, you know, in all actuality, depending on the circumstances. Ultimately, it was up to the father of the bridegroom because, you know, as the custom would have it, the bridegroom would have to go away and he wouldn't be able to come back until Dad said he could. Now, this explains how Yahushua could truthfully say that he didn't know when he'd return. You know, because he truly didn't, because he knows it's at the okay of his father. So he says in Matthew 24:36, but of that day and the hour know of no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. See, and only the Father knows when this would happen. Now, during this time of purification, the bridegroom is hard at work preparing a place for his new bride. You know, he had to go back and he had to prepare a place for his new bride. You know, and while he was preparing a place, he also had to learn about being a husband. Because you're not born knowing how to be a husband. You know, so when you get two people, you know, get together, and they don't know nothing about marriage, they don't know nothing about being a husband, nothing about being a wife, you know, and they're trying to do this thing by trial by error, you know, you get all kind of stuff that goes awry. And rightfully so, because, you know, don't nobody know what they doing. Right. No one's been trained. You know, but they're taking these crucial roles, you know, in life and not having a clue as to what to do. Right. Now, whenever you go on any job for any employer of the world, they give you some type of training, don't they? You know, but you're going to enter into a lifelong covenant without even seeing what it's about first, without learning what it takes, what's going to be expected of you, and what it takes to actually do your role, to do your part. You know, see, this is the reason why we have so many failed marriages today, because we've gotten away from Yah's principles. Yes, yes.
Yes.
You know, we've gotten away from his way of doing things.
Yes.
You know, and contrary to popular belief, you know, there is a Yah's way for doing everything in life.
Yes, yes, yes.
There's a Yah's way, you know, for doing everything in life. You know, and the thing is, we just need to search it out.
Yes.
Search it out and figure out what it is that he wants us to do before we do it.
Yes.
You know, what his word speaks to how we should do it.
Yes.
See, and that will curtail a whole lot of this mess that's going on.
Exactly.
You know, we wouldn't have a over 70% divorce rate. You know, we got to get back to doing things Yah's way. You know, we got to get back to having a scriptural reason for the things that we say and do. You're not just doing them because, you know, at a whim or because we want to. You know, but we need to really consider these things. You know, we read in Yochanan 14:2-4 says, "In my Father's house are many mansions." You know, we see the Messiah in conjunction with the custom is telling them, you know, in my Father's house are many mansions. If it weren't so, I would not have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And he's talking to each and every one of us. He's gone to prepare a place for us. That is, if we're to take him up on the offer and become a candidate to be his bride. That is, if we're to wash ourselves with the water of the word. He don't want no funky bride. He wants us to wash ourselves with the water of the word, to purify ourselves, to be without spot or wrinkle. You know, he only wants a pure bride without spot or wrinkle. And the way that we get that way is by washing with the water of the word. You know, don't be taking no dry baths. You know, that is not going to cut it. You know, during this time of purification, the bridegroom's always at work. You know, he says, if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself. This was the custom. You know, the bridegroom would leave and he would go to prepare a place for his prospective bride. And you best believe he was coming back for her just as soon as he could get there. But it wouldn't be until Dad gave the okay. Until he had, you know, prepared a place that stands up to the family name, so to speak. You know, there was morals there. There was, you know, integrity and character that had to go into that spoke of who and where you came from. You know, we need to get some of that back, some of that family pride back. You know, when we say we belong to the Messiah, you know, we're saying that we belong to the ultimate stock.
Yes.
And we need to present ourselves accordingly. You know, it says, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, ye may be also, and whither I go, ye know, and the way ye know. Well, he had already taught them the way to where he was going while he was walking with them, and it was through his commandments, through his teachings and instructions. See, and we have to get, you know, a hold of it, and we have to utilize it so that we can get on that path and get to our king and our soon-to-be husband. Amen? Now, in the scheme of things, the ecclesia is a spouse to Yahushua and is being trained and prepared to become that beautiful bride of his. You know, but he's the King of Kings. You know, it's only right that he receive the bride of brides. You know, he don't want just no any old body. You know, hence we have Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians 11:2 saying, "For I am jealous over you with godly jealousy. For I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Messiah. For I fear lest by any means, as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety, so your minds should be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Messiah." You know, it's not a hard thing. You know, can I have my next reader read Yochanan 16:13-15?
Howbeit, when he, the Ruach of truth, is come, he will guide you into all truth. For he shall not speak of himself, but whatsoever he shall hear, that shall he speak, and he will show you things to come. He shall glorify me, for he shall receive of mine, and shall show it unto you. All things that the Father hath are mine. Therefore said I, that he shall take of mine, and shall show it unto you.
Okay, so this is the way that in that interim, if the bridegroom wanted to communicate with his bride, he would send his one of the bridegrooms, not bridegroom, one of his best men, so to speak, and they would play the intermediary, and this is what the Ruach HaKodesh is for us. He's that one that comes and gives us the messages of Yah, and he's the one that takes our messages back to Yah. Now, an interesting aspect to the ancient wedding was that during this interim, while the bride was making herself ready, she would sew her own wedding gown. Yes. She would sew her own wedding gown. That was a part of making herself ready. Now, I'll have you know, if you don't make yourself a gown now, you won't have one then. That's something to think about. If you don't make your gown now, then you won't have one then. In researching on this, I found that young women was often start working on their wedding gown even at 9 years old. In hopes that it'll be done by the time they're chosen. So they got a jump start on things. Even before they were picked. So that says a lot in the spiritual, doesn't it? Yeah. When the father finally says it's time to retrieve the bride, the bridegroom will get his friend or friends to accompany him. And they go before him with the blowing of shofars and shouting, "Behold, the bridegroom comes!" They'll come shouting and sounding the alarm. We may not be too far off from this actually transpiring. Before we started, we had Yeshua's kids read the parable of the 10 virgins. And seeing that we're supposed to be like those virgins, I think this is, very good that we go over, during this time. So we're going to break this parable down, all the way down to the very last compound. It says, Matthew 25:1, "Then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened unto 10 virgins, which took their lamps and went forth to meet the bridegroom." And I'm pretty sure everybody knows who the bridegroom is. I mean,
Yes.
That's Yahushua. And it says, 10 virgins. These 10 virgins actually speaks to the 10 tribes of Israel. We see in 1 Kings 11:34 through 36, it says, "Howbeit I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him prince all the days of his life for David, my servant's sake, whom I chose because he kept my commandments and my statutes." This is just the backdrop to this passage, speaking about taking the kingdom from the lineage of David during the time of Solomon. It says, and he's saying, "Howbeit I will not take the whole kingdom." I'm going to take it from him. I'm not going to take the whole kingdom. But I will make him a prince all the days of his life, speaking of Solomon, for David, my servant's sake, whom I chose, because he kept my commandments and statutes. So, there's something to be learned here. How many of you know that you can cause your children to be blessed?
Yeah.
Just because you do rightly. And this is what we're seeing here. Solomon, was spared because of his father, David. But he goes on to verse 35, "But I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand and will give it unto thee, even 10 tribes." So the reverse is true as well. But Yah says he'll no longer pass on the curses of the fathers unto the children. But he never took back the blessing part. So You can still cause your children to be blessed, by doing what's right. In verse 36, and unto his son will I give one tribe, that David my servant may have light always before me in Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen. I have chosen me to put my name there. And of course, this one tribe that he was speaking about that he would give David was the tribe of Levi, which was where in Jerusalem, where they dwelt in, where he had chose to put his name there. And they were to be that light to lead David back to Yah. And this is real important because we're talking about 10 virgins, and we just been going over the virgins and what's expected of them, amen, in this marriage process. And we see the kingdom of heaven is likened unto 10 virgins, speaking of Israel, and it says, which took their lamps, and 2 Samuel 22, 29, and Psalms 119, 105, and Proverbs 6:23 speaks to what the lamps spiritually represent. It says, for thou art my lamp, O Yahuwah, and Yahuwah will lighten my darkness. So we see that, Yahuwah is these lamps that they're carrying, but we're going to narrow it down a little more with Psalms 119, 105. Thy word, speaking of Yahuwah's word, thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. So now we see Yahuwah's word is that lamp. And then Proverbs 6:23, for the commandment is a lamp, and the law is a light, and the reproofs of instructions are the way of life. So we see that Yahuwah's word, that is his commandments, his Torah, is that lamp and that light. Everybody still with me? Mm-hmm. All right. So we know we know who the virgins are. Mm-hmm. We know what they represent. The 10, by the 10. Speaking of all of Israel, all the northern 10 tribes of Israel, and we know what the lamps represent. Word of Elohim. Amen. Mm-hmm. All right. Now we can move forward. After Yahoo 25:2 says, and the 5 of them were wise and 5 were foolish. Okay, now what does Yahushua mean by wise and foolish? We want to thoroughly understand this because we don't want to be foolish. We want to be wise. Amen? So we got to make sure we thoroughly understand what wisdom is, scripturally speaking, and what foolishness is, scripturally speaking. See, because the world has their way, of discerning the wise, and they have their way of concerning who's foolish. Amen? But we want to go in accordance to the word. Psalms 119, 7 and 8 says, the law of Yahuwah is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of Yahuwah is sure, making wise the simple. All right now. So we see the law of Yahuwah, and the testimony of Yahuwah makes one wise. So we know a wise one is going to have possession of his Torah, his law, and also is going to be testifying of Yah, because that's what makes one wise. Amen. Verse 8, the statutes of Yahuwah are right, rejoicing in the heart. The commandment of Yahuwah is pure, enlightening to the eyes. Okay, so we know that they're going to have the word of Elohim. Proverbs 10:8. The wise in heart shall receive commandments, but a prating fool shall fall. Okay, so we see the wise in heart will receive the commandments of Elohim. So if one is truly wise from a scriptural perspective, they'll receive the commandments of Elohim. They won't be sitting up there talking about, that was old. I mean, if he said it, that should be good enough. Why you got to repeat itself? If he said it in the Old Testament, what you got to say it in the New Testament for? There's no, that's redundant. There's no need for that. The wise in heart will receive commandments, but a prating fool shall fall. Proverbs 10:14, wise men lay up knowledge, but the mouth of the foolish is near destruction. So we see if we're to be wise, we take knowledge and we lay it up. We hold on to it. We don't get rid of it. Okay? Now, we see in verse 8 it says, but a prating fool shall fall. That's one who talks too much. You know, a motor mouth. You know, in slang terms, certain locutions, or very locutions in, you know, more technical terms. You know, it said, but the mouth of the foolish is near destruction. You know, they always speaking to bring down instead of to build up. You know, that's foolishness. Proverbs 12:18. There is that speaketh like the piercings of a sword, but the tongue of the wise is health. In other words, the fool, he wants to cut folks up. He want to cut them up. He want to bring them down. But the wise, when they give counsel, it's to build up. You know, it's to help out. It helps better the situation. Proverbs 12:15, the way of the fool is right in his own eyes, but he that hearkeneth unto counsel is wise. So those who are scripturally wise, they hearken unto the counsel. Whose counsel? Yah's counsel, of course. But the fool, the way of the fool is right in his own eyes. You know, I see it this way, and this is the way it's going to be for me. I don't care what nobody else say. It's right in their own eyes. Never mind, you know, whether if it's right in Yah's eyes. Proverbs 14:16, a wise man feareth and departeth from evil, but the fool rageth and is confident. Again, wisdom feareth and departeth from evil. Okay, I see in Yah's word to say don't do this, I'm not going to do it. Period. I'm going to depart from that evil. But the fool rageth and is confident. Well, I see it the way I see it, and you do it your way, I'm doing mine. It's not about doing it my way or somebody else's way. It's about doing it Yah's way. Proverbs 8:33, hear instruction and be wise. You know, again, the wise, they hearken unto instruction. They look for it. You know, you see David, you know, before he'd do something, he tried to get the instruction of Yah. Yah, you going to be with me in this? Yah, you want me to do this? You know, hear instruction and be wise and refuse it not. You know, that's real important. You know, now, we also see that there's 2 sets of 5 here. You know, the 10 is broken up into 2 sets of 5. You know, this speaks to the wise as well as the foolish are the children of grace. For 5 is the number that typifies grace. So this points out that they're all children of grace. In other words, these are all believers of Messiah, because he's the one that ushered in our grace. Amen. So they're all believers of Messiah, but you know, you got some wise believers of Messiah, and you have some foolish believers of Messiah. You know, they're broken up into two sets of 5. The wise equal those with the testimony of Yah, who receive commandments and lay up knowledge and run around with other wise ones. They hearken unto the wise counsel of those other wise ones and refuse it not. They haven't any problem receiving instructions. Therefore, when they give counsel, it brings about health to a situation or a circumstance rather than damnation. But on the other hand, the foolish are those who talk too much. And when they speak, they tear down rather than build up. They're always right in their own eyes, even if Yah's word says that they're wrong. And rather than depart from evil like the wise, they insist that the way they see it is right, and therefore rageth and is confident that they're right anyway, in spite of what the word said. You know, so that's the difference betwixt the wise and the foolish. And we want to be the wise. After Yahoo 25:3, they that were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them. Yeah, that sounds pretty foolish. You know, they took their lamps and took no oil with them. Now, that's not to be taken literally. They did have oil to begin with in their lamps, but they brought no extra oil with them. So that's not to say that they didn't bring any oil at all, you know, but they didn't bring any extra oil, you know, just in case, you know, which was foolish. Leviticus 24:2 says, command the children of Israel that they bring unto thee pure oil, olive beaten for the light, to cause the lamps to burn continually. Again, in Exodus 27:20, it says, and thou shalt command the children of Israel that they bring the pure oil, olive beaten for the light, to cause the lamp to burn always. You know, a few weeks ago, we went over the olive tree and how the olive oil was actually made. And what we spoke to then was that the olive tree, you know, when it was in time to harvest it, the way they harvested it was that they took long sticks and poles, and they would beat the tree so severely that they wouldn't get another full harvest, you know, until the year after next. You know, because they beat the tree that bad to get all the olives off of it. You know, and this is a picture of how the olive oil is made. You know, the olive oil is made through severe persecution of the olive tree, you know, and the branches, you know, and considering that we're the branches, you know, that the branches all the time are beat till they break off, you know. But so this is important to understand, because the olive oil in general typify the testimony of Yahushua. But in conjunction to this parable, it speaks specifically to the testimonies of the two witnesses that's found in Revelation chapter 11, who along with the bride of Yahushua will be persecuted for righteousness' sake, as well as their testimonies concerning Yahushua. You know, for this speaks to the time, to the end of time, you know, when Yahushua will come back for his bride, you know, and, you know, he sends his groomsmen out to actually announce the call, you know. And we're even told in Zechariah that they are the two olive trees. And we know that they're going to severely beat these olive trees, you know, and leave them for dead for 3 days and 3 nights, you know, out in the open so everyone could see. And many of us, you know, that adhere to them and try to help them, we're going to receive likewise. Verses 4 and 5 of Matthew 25 says, but the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. While the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept. Okay, so we see the foolish, they didn't take oil, but the wise, they brought oil in their vessels. They brought extra oil, you know, besides what was in their lamps. You know, now, while the bridegroom tarried, which speaks to the time of even now, because Yahushua is he's still going to prepare a place for us. You know, he's still gone, so he's still tarrying. So we're waiting for him to come back. Amen. Yeah. You know, so while we're waiting for him to come back, you know, it says they all slumbered and slept. You know, and many of us, you know, if we look at quote unquote Christianity, we'll see that it's been asleep a long time. But praise be to God, starting to wake up.
Hallelujah.
Amen.
Starting to wake up. Verses 6 and 7 of Matthew 25. It says, and at midnight there was a cry made, behold, the bridegroom cometh. Go ye out to meet him. Then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. Okay, now here come the call. You know, here come the call to his groomsmen. They're on the scene, and they're saying, hey, you know, it's time to come on out. It's time to come out of her. It's time to go meet Yeshua. You know, so everybody get up, you know, after, you know, we've been out there, and get up and trim our lamps, you know, so we can see where we're going, amen. And, this word trimmed is cosmio, number 2885, meaning to put in order, you know, so we actually put in order our lamps. You know, trying to see if something's missing here. I'm not gonna worry about it. So when we wake up, we go to put our lamps in order. And Matthew Yahoo 25:8 says, and the foolish said unto the wise, give us of your oil, for our lamps are gone out. Whoa. Whoa. You want some of my oil? You know, Proverbs 13:9 says, the light of the righteous rejoiceth. And truly, it's time to go meet the Messiah. We're going to be rejoicing. But the lamp of the wicked shall be put out. You know, see, the reason that they don't have any oil left is because they were wicked. You know, so, you know, that's why they don't have any oil left. It says, but the wise answer saying, not so, lest there be not enough for us and you. But go ye rather to them that sell and buy for yourselves. And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came. And they that were ready went in with him to the marriage, and the door was shut. You know, so learn a lesson. Proverbs 23:23 says, buy the truth. So what did they go to try to buy? They went to go try to buy the truth. You know, they had the lamp. That is, they had the word of Elohim. You know, but they didn't have enough truth. You know, they go and buy the truth and sell it not. Also, sell it not. But actually that word it isn't there. And the word also isn't there. So actually it says buy the truth and sell not wisdom and instruction and understanding. So your wisdom, you know, whatever wisdom, instruction, and understanding that you have, you want to hold on to. Yeah. Don't get rid of it. You know, and in the meantime and in between time, buy all the truth that you can. You know, when the father finally says it's time to retrieve the bride, the bridegroom will get his friends to accompany him. I just read this, didn't I? Yeah. This is a repeat. This is a repeat. Okay, we're just going to move right along. You know. Verses 11 through 13. Afterward came also the other virgin saying, Adonai, Adonai, open to us. But he answered and said, verily I say unto you, I know you not. And these are the same ones, you know, that's been in them all this time, you know, sleeping, you know, in them and everything. He said, I know you not. Watch therefore, for ye know neither the day nor the hour wherein the Son of Man cometh. Now, again, during the interim of awaiting the bridegroom's return, it was customary for the bride to make herself ready for a coming bride. Hence we read in Revelation 19:7-8, let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and the wife has made herself ready. And to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for the fine linen is the righteousness of the saints. And, you know, just how does the bride make herself ready? Well, Esther 2:12 teaches us, now, when every maid's turn was come to go into King Assyria's, after that which she had been 12 months according to the manner of women, and this was what they used to do, for so were the days of their purification accomplished, to wit 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months of sweet odors. So during this time, half the time you're supposed to be with oil of myrrh. That is, you're supposed to be in prayer. You know, and the other half of the time, the sweet odors speaks to sacrifice. You know, so we're to be in prayer and sacrifice unto Yah during this time, you know, to make ourselves ready. You know, don't go to sleep until after you already done made your wedding gown, until you already done prepared yourself. So let's take a retrospective look at this awesome masterpiece that Yah is actually painting for us concerning these virgins in their lamps. Recall that the lamps speak to the word of Elohim. Now within the lamp is the oil. That was the part that was missing. Well, the oil typifies the testimony of Yahshua. You know, and within the oil lies the wicks. And according to the Yahudim folklore, the wicks were made from the linen garments of the priest, which speaks to the works of righteousness that causes blood to be spilled, that is, sacrificial works. You know, that was the works of the priests were to offer the sacrifices. So within this, we see a beautiful picture of Yah painting those 10 wise virgins that had oil in their lamps. That is, the oil spoke to their testimonies, you know, and the wick speaks to their righteous works. Their righteous works and their sacrificial works that, you know, and we know what it took to make that olive oil. You know, the olive oil was made through persecution. It was made through persecution. And when you go around testifying of Yahshua, then you will become persecuted. You know, when you truly going around and you testifying of him, you know, and you actually doing what he said, you know, it will bring about persecution. You know, and it takes a sacrifice to do this. You know, that speaks of the sacrificial works. You know, and we are called to be priests in the order of Melchizedek. And we're to present our bodies as living sacrifices, holy and acceptable unto Yah, which is our reasonable service. You know, so I leave you with this. Matthew 25:13 once again. Watch therefore, for ye know neither the day nor the hour wherein the Son of Man cometh. The bride will consist of those that have made themselves ready. Is that you? Can you look in the mirror and say, yes, I am ready? Have you done enough righteous and sacrificial works to make yourself a wedding garment from? You know, you got enough in the bank? You done enough works to make a wedding garment from? If you had to leave right now, would you have a wedding gown? Or just a dress? Or maybe a mini skirt? Or maybe just a halter top? You know, how many good works do you have stored away? You know, are you watching? He's telling us to watch. What you say, you're trying to watch, but you can't see. Can't stay awake, still slumbering. Well, if you can't see, you must not have been testifying of Yahushua. But this speaks to your oil. You know, and if you've been testifying of him enough, you have oil in your lamp. So this speaks to your oil being out. And if your oil's not, if your oil isn't out, then it means you're not burning it. That means you have a lamp full of oil, but you're refusing to burn it. Which speaks to you carrying the lamp, that is Yah's word, but not doing the righteousness of the one that you've been testifying of, which makes you a hypocrite. For your lamp is to be filled with testimonies of Yahshua, that it might bring light unto the world. It's not for you to keep to yourself. It's not for you just to go around and say, well, you know, hey, I got a full lamp. You know, notice while they were slumbering, they still had their lamps lit. When they awoken from their sleep, they realized their lamp had went out. That tells us that they were lit. You know, in other words, you know, they were testifying in their sleep. We're in that interim. And, you know, even now, while we're waiting on the Messiah to come back, we're still to be testifying of him. And there's going to come a time when, you know, there's going to be a hefty price attached to testifying of him. You know, folks are going to become ashamed of the name of our Messiah. And they're going to be running, you know, from having to testify of him. But just remember, when these times come upon you, that the Messiah said, if you be ashamed of me, I'll be ashamed of you. You know, you don't get the fire. You know, Yah is the consuming fire. You know, the wick is our righteous works and our sacrificial works. It's the things that we do that the word tells us to do, as well as, you know, the things that we decide to do just because we know they're right. You know, see, this wick is saturated with our testimonies. See, we're not to be hypocrites. So if we are truly testifying of Yahshua, then our righteous works should be saturated with those testimonies. We shouldn't be testifying of Yahshua and doing something different than what he says, because that will make us a hypocrite. You know, there will be no light. See, but Yah consumes those sacrifices that are offered up, you know, when we do the teachings and instructions of Elohim, when we present our bodies as a living sacrifice. You know, in other words, you know, when we testify of Yahshua and our righteous works are saturated in those testimonies, you know, then it pushes our flesh up so Yah can consume it with his marvelous light. And in doing so, it gives light to everyone that's around us. You know, so for everyone who wants to help bring their families into the fold, this is how it's done. Not just by telling them, you know, because then you just got a lamp full of oil. But by actually doing his teachings and instructions. Allowing Yah's consuming fire to burn away any and everything that is not of him that remains in your flesh. Presenting it unto him, holy and acceptable, which is our reasonable service. And then if we want some brownie points, we can go beyond that. But that's where it starts. That's where it starts. And that's where we'll end. I pray that it was a blessing to you. And